you'll hear this across the board, right? Everyone's super excited about agents because, I've read forecasts where the assumption was we'd start getting to agentic AI around 2030, but already 2025, we're finding useful applications of it. We made quite a few announcements at our reInvent conference last year about introducing these agentic capabilities into the services that AWS provides, mostly for developer productivity, but even on business and consumer apps. So things like categorizing emails, right, and routing tickets to the right places. Those are all simple use cases that can be super powerful with agents. So I think we're going to see a lot of that this year.
Thank you very much for taking time to speak to us today. Before we start, for those who have not had the pleasure of meeting you, can you briefly tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Alfred Mukudu. I lead go-to-market strategy and business development for financial services customers at AWS. And my job really is to help people understand their strategic roadmaps, their use cases, the opportunities where they have to innovate, and help them bridge the gap with how AWS can support that innovation. So really, really excited about the upcoming FinTech Week, and looking forward to a good discussion.
All right, Alfred, let's start the conversation today talking about AI. Because, okay, we know that AI has now been in the mouth of everyone for the past 3 years. We've gone through different flavors of AI. We started just with general, automation, and now we're talking about generative AI for the past couple of years. So I would like to ask you, so what do you see are the main applications of generative AI, especially when it comes to optimizing the customer experience?
What I'll do is I'll take a bit of a step back to contextualize these use cases and how they're evolving towards hyper-personalization. So like you just mentioned, right, we haven't heard much on the customer side. And it's simply because for highly regulated industries, right, banks, fintechs, they have to be a little bit more cautious in how you deploy these technologies. So over the past 2 to 3 years, we've seen lots of use cases that focus on middle and back office functions, helping people become more productive. But we're starting to see that as organizations increase their trust in large language models, machine learning as a whole, and they mature their data capabilities, they're starting to push more into the customer space. So my take is I think we're going to see quite a lot of investment in customer experience and how people use these. So when you look at customer experience and personalization, a couple of years ago, we had quite a lot of investment in chatbots, right? Helping people understand financial products better, improving financial literacy, and using large language models to help bridge that gap between complex products and how people understand how they use them. So that was almost an initial phase of personalization, right? Where you go from an email that says, "Dear customer," to one that says, "Dear Alfred," and then from "Dear Alfred" to "Dear Alfred, let's help you understand this product," which is great. But now we're moving into this hyper-personalization, right? Where essentially we should start seeing a lot of people moving beyond basic segmentation of customers into true one-to-one personalization at scale. And a good example is NatWest Bank, right, over in the UK. They've spoken publicly about this. They're a very good customer of AWS. They've been doing amazing things with generative AI and machine learning, combining the two to get to hyper-personalization, right? So they enabled over 2 million people to save for the first time just from being able to personalize the messaging specific to the individual, getting out that messaging at scale regularly and safely, and allowing people to interact with their channels and their products in a way that makes sense for them and speaks to their individual behaviors. So I think for me, when we talk of hyper-personalization, we're finding it's becoming easier to run campaigns, messaging, outreach, interactions at such a personalized level, one-to-one, rather than at a segment level, which is where we're going to start to see a lot of those innovation in terms of, for example, having custom content. You can have one campaign, but 10 customers receive 10 different emails with different messaging that suits them. And I think that's a really, really exciting space to be in.
All right, Alfred. Now, let's move on to the topic of the year, because we keep hearing that 2025 is going to be the year of Agentic AI. So I would like to ask you first, can you help us understand what is Agentic AI? How does it differ from generative AI? And also, what do companies need to do in order to prepare for the arrival of AI agents to be able to leverage the maximum use of this type of technology that is now becoming much more accessible and mainstream especially in financial services?
Agentic AI think of it as an AI system that can independently perform tasks and make decisions. And how that's different from generative AI and the use of large language models as we were introduced to them is that a large language model is good at interpreting using natural language, but in and of itself, it can't perform any actions. So the differentiator there is agents which are able to act based on a conversation, right? So, simple example, let's say you have a chatbot that you can ask, how many leave days do I have? And it can respond. It'll check your leave balances and it'll tell you you've got, 3 days that you can spend on a nice island. Where agentic AI takes effect is where you can then say, well, now that I know I've got 3 leave days, can you book this leave for me or book the trip for me? And then the agent in the background starts to execute on that instruction, breaking the instruction down into logical steps, executing. Once it's done, it gives you back feedback in natural language. So it's an evolution of generative AI. It's part of it, but it's around making the generative AI models useful for the workflows that we act with in day-to-day life. So for agentic AI to work, you need to be able to do two things. You need to be able to have access to a knowledge repository. So things like standard operating procedures, database access, good clean data. So you need good data fundamentals for these models to augment what they generate. Then the second thing on the technical layer that you need is the ability to take action. So you need to have microservices, good APIs that these agents can connect to in order to execute the tasks at hand. Without those two fundamentals, it's going to be super difficult to leverage agentic AI for automation. If you think about an agentic AI running in the background 24 hours a day, making decisions and completing tasks, you're going to need good governance to ensure that the agentic AI is doing what it was intended to do and it's doing it consistently and accurately. So you need to invest a lot in some thinking around how do we deploy these systems? How do they interact with other systems downstream? How do we check the accuracy of the results? And how do we govern how these agents are being used in enterprises as well as fintechs? And then the third area is just around upskilling your people. Make sure people understand what these things are. Agents rely quite a bit on good prompt engineering. So you need to upskill people on how to prompt the agents and get them to automate properly, as well as just a general understanding of what this automation entails, what's a good workflow to automate and what isn't.
I want to understand from your perspective, how is Amazon Web Services dealing with this increased demand, and especially when it comes to enabling financial organizations to become more innovative or to deal with innovation, to deal with things like privacy, things like regulatory compliance. Tell us a little bit, what is it that Amazon Web Services is doing in that regard?
I think at AWS, we've taken a point of view around two key areas, right? One is around democratizing access to these technologies. So it's around giving people choice, choice in how you manage your encryption, choice in how you deploy your services, choice in terms of what large language models you can leverage with our platforms like Bedrock, choice in terms of the infrastructure that you can use, right? So we've got over 600 compute instances that you can choose from, different database types. So we're really, really pushing hard on innovating on those core fundamental building blocks so that no matter what your size is, whether you're an enterprise or a fintech, you get to choose the technologies and how you deploy and implement them. I believe as we continue to push into the future and people start to figure out new and creative use cases, that ability to choose how you implement, as well as what level of pre-built automations you have with it, is going to be super powerful.
All right, Alfred, and let me just ask you, what cloud technology advancements are you most excited about to see in the next few years?
Maybe two areas. I think in the short to medium term, I'm quite excited about the new technologies around our edge computing services. I think the timing is really, really good. So we've got services such as Outposts, local zones, AWS Wavelength that provide computing capabilities at the edge. So really, really stretching the reach of the cloud from an individual region. And for me, that's exciting because it means you're able to run more and more applications at the edge closer to where your customers are. And if you look at the parallel trend with large language models becoming faster and more efficient, it's going to be super exciting if you are able to run some of these models on device, close to where the customer is, and the inference is done there without needing to rely on massive connectivity and infrastructure at the edge. And a little bit further out, we've got some new developments in Web3, so our managed blockchain service, quantum computing, quantum networking. I think those are going to be super transformative. once they mature to a stage where they can be commercialized. So really, really exciting.
Right. And when we talk to financial services organizations and fintechs, we always hear that data privacy and protecting their customers' data is paramount for them. It's at the top of their agenda. So can you tell us how does Amazon Web Service enable these type of organizations to secure the customers' data and to ensure that they can protect it and they can adhere to regulatory standards when it comes to the use and transfer of data?
It's a good question. For us, security is job zero for us. It's where many of our design, our thinking, it starts with security. So the way I would encourage fintechs to think about it is in line with those two themes I mentioned earlier around sort of democratization and choice. And so we provide different layers at which we enable fintechs to secure the privacy of the data, as well as the security of the applications themselves. Beyond that, the actual services themselves are built with security in mind. So we provide services that allow you to encrypt your data at rest or whilst it's in motion. We've got services that are able to monitor as well how code is being written. So services like Amazon Macy will make recommendations to say, look, you could secure your S3 bucket a little bit more securely by leveraging these patterns. So supporting developers as they build these applications. And then finally, we also then provide individual expertise. And this is something our customers aren't necessarily aware of. I've noticed across a number of regions. We have financial services industry specialists, compliance and security specialists hired from fintechs, from financial institutions, and their role is to help guide you in terms of how you meet the compliance requirements, how you leverage the security controls available in AWS. We believe the more support we can give people around controls, security, and compliance, the more secure they feel in deploying to the cloud.
Now, of course, Alfred, we're less than a week away from Stockholm Fintech Week. We're super excited to see you on stage. Can you tell us, can you give us a little teaser of what the audience can expect to hear from you when you take the stage at Stockholm Fintech Week?
Yeah, look, I'm looking forward to it. Super excited. So I'm going to be covering hyper-personalization, but the perspective I'm taking for that keynote is I'm going to look at kind of why hyper-personalization is important and what's led us to this point. And then I'll use 3 different customer examples. NatWest is one of them, spoiler alert. I'll use 3 different customer examples to showcase what are some of the learnings we're seeing from these types of customers and how they're deploying personalization, so that it's a little bit more practical as a fintech, how you can also start to use some of those learnings and techniques in building your own personalization journey. So it should be a super interesting keynote, and I hope to see everyone there.
Well, Alfred, can't wait. It sounds like a really, really exciting session, and very much looking forward to seeing you there and hearing what you have to share from what Amazon and NatWest are doing together in order to hyper-personalize the customer experience.
Thank you so much, Chris.